Hey, welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I really hope you enjoy this video. All right, everybody. So today my intention is we're going to start going through the RPA and writing an offer and try to write an offer as strong as possible, because we all know that right now it is not very easy to get offers accepted. So my intent is that maybe we can improve the ability of getting your offers accepted by maybe the strength of and the quality of the writing of the offer, because the amount of contracts I see from within and from without this office, there's holes in offers, right? And I think there's some things that we need to be conscious of when we're writing those offers and making sure that the conversations we're having with our buyers when we're writing the offers. So this class is going to be solely about writing offers. We're not going to talk about counters. We're not going to talk about anything like that. We're going to talk about solely writing the offer, putting our best foot forward, and making sure we're doing the right things for our buyer clients. Okay. So if there's any questions, let me know now. Otherwise, I'm going to share the screen and we're going to get started with writing offers. Yes, Anthony.
I do actually have a question.
Sure.
Would you recommend doing the escalation clause when we're doing our offers?
I think that's some like with anything, there is a pro and a con to making that choice. The pro is, right, that when we put an escalation clause, we're telling the listing agent and the seller that we're willing to do whatever it is necessary to get the property, right? We're going to write our offer for $1,000 over, $5,000 over, whatever your best offer is. The problem I see as a listing agent is I think that you should just be putting your best foot forward, period, right? Because what I see in a lot of escalation clauses is this. I write an offer for, let's just use the number $650,000. I write you an offer for $650,000 with an escalation clause that says I will pay $1,000 over your best offer up to a maximum of $660, right? If I'm a listing agent, if you're willing to go to $660 and you're willing to take that chance, why didn't you just write the offer at $660? Because now I know you're at $660, so guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to start countering people to $660. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I see that point. Okay.
So I mean, I get both sides of it. I can understand both sides of it from a buyer's perspective. Like, I'm going to do this to get my offer accepted. Well, that's great, but why not just go in with your best foot? And if I'm a listing agent too, then there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Right now, not only do I have to get the offer, I have to send the offer back. Then I have to redo a counter that says exactly what the offer is. There's a lot of work from a listing agent's perspective. I mean, paperwork, right? It's just one extra step in paperwork wise. But it ultimately becomes a business decision for you as an agent, whether you think that that's the best tactic for getting your offer accepted. And if you feel like that's the best way to do it, then by all means, go for it. I would never tell anybody don't do it. You just have to know what it means from both sides of that coin, right? Using it and not using it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys. So let me share my screen with you. All right. So what you should be looking at right now is Zip Forms Plus screen, right? So you guys should all be seeing that. And I just went straight to the purchase agreement. We're not going to go through the agency disclosure and the PRBS and all those other forms that do come with it, with the offer, because we want to talk about writing, and I want to get as much done in this class as possible. I'm hoping that maybe we could do this in one, maybe two. Let's see what happens. Okay, so first off, let's look at the date prepared. Very straightforward from going over the offers in the past and going through contract class. I'm writing that offer today, so date prepared is March 31st, 2022. Very straightforward. This is an offer from. Now, as you can see, I got 4 names I can write in here. Remember, we've talked about only 2 can sign this agreement, and if we have more than the 2, they're going to sign an additional signature addendum. We're going to keep this very straightforward and simple. We're going to have we'll have 2 buyers, right? So first buyer is Tom Smith, right? Second buyer is John Smith. So we got our 2 buyers, right? We're set. Make sure when you're writing the offer that name is the correct legal full name of your buyers. Only because, remember, we're talking about strength of offer. And if later on, if I happen to get my offer accepted, if afterwards I have to now do addendums and amendments to this contract because I put the wrong names on here, it makes me look like a little bit less of an agent less professional agent than I am. And it maybe causes some communication and difficulty between me and the listing agent on other things that we need to do, because automatically they're going to have an opinion of me like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. Property to be acquired, make sure you have the correct address, right? So I don't have a listing to go off, so we're going to use our office address, right? We're buying this office, right? So make sure I have the proper address. The city here is Pico Rivera, right? And the county is Los Angeles. And the zip code, I went too fast, is 90660, right? So there it is. I've got the entire address. Now, parcel number, I am not a stickler on parcel number unless the property doesn't have a physical street address or there are multiple parcels, right? Because you see it says assessor's parcel number or numbers, this little S here. Then it is really important, and please make sure that those parcel numbers are correct. So you got to pull your property profiles, get those parcel numbers, okay? So we're not going to do it here. I don't know the parcel number, and it's not that important because we have a physical street address, and it's the correct address. So we check the address is correct on the property we're writing the offer on. I have that done. Okay. Next, there are little things. Maybe it's just me speaking as someone who has to deal with the contracts, but little things matter to me when I'm looking at a contract. And when I see things, when I see shortcuts or I see things from a buyer's agent that got missed, I start to assume that they're going to be missing other things as I move forward. And usually what happens is it's true. If I review a contract for you guys that you have received on your listing or that you're going to submit, the first thing I check for is what happens here, right, in this section for the confirmation. Because we sent out that agency disclosure with it, and that agency disclosure that we had signed by our buyer is explaining the ways that you can be represented by an agent. This is confirming it in this specific transaction, how the clients are going to be represented. So let's just say it is, the listing agent is Banana Realty. I think I spelled banana wrong, but whatever. Doesn't matter. They're a bad real estate office anyway. And I have to put their license number in. Right, so their license number is 0123 4567, right? And they are the broker for the seller. Now, you see when I check off the seller up here, guess what it does for the agent? It checks off the box for seller's agent already. Seller's agent is Ann Jones, okay? Right, so she's the agent, and then we got to do her license number in here, right? So we put her license number in. Make sure you have the license numbers in because that is part of the confirmation, right? So now we have them as a seller's agent. Well, the buyer's agent is us, right? Because we're writing this offer, and we have to make sure that we have our license number in there, 01280965, right? That's All Stars license number. And they are the broker. All Stars is the broker for the buyer only. And I am the agent. I can't even spell my own name, right? I am the buyer's agent. So the boxes are checked here. I put my number in, 014577. What is my number? I forgot. Look at that. I forgot my own license number. I think that's it. Okay. So I am representing here. Banana Realty is the seller's broker. Ann Jones is the seller's agent. Century All Stars is the buyer's broker. Kyle Estrada is the buyer's agent. That is one of the first things I look at. And without fail, if that is not filled out correctly, missing license numbers, missing the boxes checked off, there's other stuff as I move through the offer that is filled out incorrectly or is skipped. Okay, so like this is... Remember, we're making first impressions. And a lot of times as we write offers and make those first impressions on the listing agent and the seller, the impression of the agent representing the buyer sometimes carries as much weight as the buyer's qualifications. So if I don't, because, and here's the reason why listing agents look at it, and you should look at it that way also, is that if the buyer's agent doesn't know how to fill out a contract correctly, and the buyer's agent is the person who I'm going to spend the next 25 to 45 days dealing with to get a transaction closed, my opinion of that buyer's agent is going to weigh heavily on the choices I make for the buyer that I move forward with. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? So we have to make a good first impression. So making sure that boxes are checked, license numbers are in, the broker's names and the agent's names are correct in there. Make sure that is correct. Okay? So now we get down to the purchase price. Purchase price is, let's say that we're buying this building for $1 million. I don't know why it doesn't want to go in. It went to $1. Let's say it's did I do $1 million there? Oh, 10 million. Sure. Why not? So we're buying this building for $10 million. Close of escrow. We're going to always go days. Now, be honest. If you cannot close this deal in 21 days, don't put 21 days. But if you're certain that you have underwriter approval and all of the things you need, right, you have the DU approval from your lender and you feel like you're confident and that you can close in the 21 days, then go for it. I would always suggest just stick with the 30, and especially as we're working in this market right now, the majority of the properties that we're writing offers on are contingent on that seller finding a replacement property. So, realistically, unless that property is vacant, the 21 days is not going to be your escrow period anyway. So make it make sense. Okay, so 30 days. This is for a very specific date here on escrow close, and only use that if it's necessary, that there's a specific date that the property has to close on. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to be living off of this number of days after acceptance. Now, the number of days after acceptance is we could close earlier if both parties agree that you can close earlier. So I would just suggest, let's be honest, because if we can't close in 21 days, don't start that way, and explain to them, just writing 21 doesn't make your offer stronger just because it's a shorter escrow. Okay, expiration of offer. This offer will expire 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures. Now, here's where communication comes in with the listing agent. If I talk to the listing agent and tell them I am submitting an offer, when are you presenting? And they tell me, well, okay, today is Thursday and you're submitting your offer. I am not going to present until next Tuesday because we're holding open houses this weekend. Then I'm going to make sure that my offer doesn't expire 3 calendar days from today, which would be Sunday, prior to when they told me they're going to present. Again, this is an appearance of making sure I do things properly. So guess what? I asked Anthony, the listing agent, when are you going to present? He told me that he's going to present next Tuesday, right? Next Tuesday is what? Next Tuesday is the 5th of April, if I'm right. So I'm going to put on here, let's see if I was correct. Yep, Tuesday, the 5th of April. And that's it. Now I know that they're going to present. That's when it's going to expire. Or I could even go a day past and say, okay, they're going to present on Tuesday. I'll give them till Wednesday an expiration. At least showing that little bit of understanding to the listing agent that, hey, I had a conversation with him. I told them when they was going to present, and now he's made his offer valid for that period of time. Okay? Initial deposit. We want to make our initial deposit as much as possible. I know now in this market where prices are getting that more and more listing agents are asking for that 3% down, right? Or 3% of the purchase price for their initial deposit. I've been seeing more and more of that. That's fine. Just you make sure you have the conversation with your buyer that if there is some dispute that comes from that includes the deposit. If it's over that $10,000 threshold that we've talked about, then it's not going to be small claims. It's going to be full on mediation arbitration. So it's a little bit more involved process. So here's the deal. If somebody's asking for the 3% down, then you've got to put it. Now, in a case like this, at a $10 million valuation, right, anything over $1 million, you're probably going to have to start that way with the 3% down. If this were a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 sale, you could probably get away with that $10,000 deposit. But put the biggest deposit that you feel comfortable with. But I would suggest it is no less than the $10,000 at this point. And remember that deposit amount, that first initial deposit amount is going to be, again, one of the first things they see about my strength of offer, okay? So keep that in mind when we do it. So let's just say I'm going to put quite a bit down here. I'm not going to put 3 million though, not that much. I'm going to put $300,000, which is the 3% of. And now this little section right here is just calculating for you to tell you what percentage of the purchase price you've put in that space. It's not you're not held to it, right? Okay. Within 3 business days, I'm not going to change this. Within 3 business days, I'm going to transfer that money in by wire transfer. I'm going to leave the deposit loan, the default alone. Okay. That's stronger. I'm not going to do anything with increased deposit unless I absolutely have to because of the amount of money that we're putting in. Okay. My loan amount now. How we're going to take care of that is whatever my loan amount is, I'm going to make sure I put it in. So let's say in this case that we're putting 20% down, and that would be what, $2 million. Did I put the right amount in there? Yes, I did. We're putting 20% down, and I'm going to put an interest rate in there. All right. Now I have to put an interest rate in. I have to put an interest rate in here. And the reason why we talked about it is that that interest rate is binding. So if I don't have the proper interest rate in there, then if we exceed that interest rate, then what's going to happen is that as a buyer, I could cancel. I could walk away. Now, I don't want that as a buyer's agent because I did all the work to get this offer accepted. And as a listing agent, obviously, I don't want that. So we have to make sure that our offer is written properly. Let's say, for example, and I don't know what rates are on loans that high, so we're not living in the real world, obviously. But let's say that my interest rate is 5%. So at a minimum, I'm going to put 5.25% in there, probably 5.5. I'm going to put in a bump of 1/4 to 0.5% to make sure that I cover any changes in the rate so that the buyer is locked in. I'm showing the listing agent we're committed to purchasing this property, that even though my approval letter or my DU letter says I'm getting a 4.75 or a 5%, I am committed to, if the rate goes to 5.5, I'm still going to purchase this property. Again, showing them my commitment and a strength of offer. Okay. So we're not going to do anything with points because most lenders aren't charging points at this point. It's default to conventional, which is fine, unless this is some other kind of financing that I'm putting in. Please make sure you're checking the appropriate boxes. Now, I'm going to say this because I've just dealt with this with one of our listings. Tell the truth. If you're writing your offer and it's FHA, tell them it's FHA. Or if you know that your buyer is going to qualify only FHA, don't write it conventional. Please don't do that. Number one is seller probably can't cancel at this point, right? Because the new contract states that, but they don't have to cooperate with your change of financing. So if I write an offer that says it's conventional and then ultimately I switch it to FHA, the seller does not have to agree with that, which means if the seller doesn't have to allow you to make that switch or do the things that are necessary, and your loan contingency doesn't protect you any longer. In the chat, when it says, "Can you leave it blank?" Nope, you cannot leave the rate blank on the loan amount on the first. You have to put a rate in there. A blank rate is the same as putting a too low of a rate, because if the buyer doesn't like the rate they get when they qualify, they can say, well, I had never committed to a rate, and I am going to cancel because I don't like that rate. This is a contract. It is not like we downplay it. We say, oh, this is an offer. This is a legally binding contract. And if there are things in there that the seller can't or the buyer can't perform to, then it's unenforceable. And if we don't have some statement as to the type of financing specific to everything that they're doing, down payment, interest rate, the amount of the loan, the whole thing, then we're leaving these windows and doors open for buyers to be able to escape and not have any consequence. So no, you cannot leave it blank on the rate. Okay. Any other questions up to this point on writing the offer? Okay. All right. Additional financing. Right now, there is no additional financing, right? I mean, there's not second trust deeds really right now, so you don't have to put anything in there. Eventually, if there were, let's say that I was doing, $1 million, right? Or instead of I put the wrong I'm backwards. I put my down payment right here, didn't I? This should have been $8 million. Sorry. That should have been $8 million. I apologize. So we got to go back. That's $8 million. $2 million would have been my down payment. If we were, let's say, doing a second trust deed, right? So I was gonna, instead of 8, let's say I was putting down 6 here, right? So I put $6 million. So now I have a 60% loan to value. My down payment is only going to be $2 million. Let's say here I do a loan for $2 million here, right? So now I have 80% is being financed here. My down payment matches. That doesn't happen anymore. These second trustees that do the 80-20 loans, right, that cover everything, that they don't exist much anymore. So don't worry about that. But that's the same thing as a first trust deed. Is I have to make sure that the interest rate is in for what that is, the total amount of it, and make sure everything matches. Okay, you want to make it clean. As we look here, let me go back to doing it the right way. This is 8 million, right? Oops, not 800,000, 8 million. Right, so I'm at 8 million. That means my balance of purchase price, my balance of down payment is 1.7 million because I put the $300,000 in here. So that would total up the 2 million for my down payment. That equals our total purchase price of 10 million. So we want to make sure that all that math adds up. Right, we want to make sure all that math adds up. My offer price is 10 million. My deposit is 300,000. My loan is 8 million. My balance of the down payment that I have to bring in is 1.7. That totals up the 10 million that I put in my offer. Okay. Questions so far on this first page? Any questions? Again, we want this offer to be as clean as possible. We have a ton of competition, so we have to make sure that we're not missing things, that we're not putting the wrong amounts in here, that we're not filling out our our loan amounts improperly, and that we have our interest rate and anything else in there. Somebody unmuted.
Kyle, this is Sylvia. I just had a question. So if the buyer is using some other funds on the 401k for their closing cost, do you add that on D too?
No, you mean to show here you're talking about this, the increased deposit?
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, if this initial deposit amount, let's say that, for example, the seller wants a 3% of the purchase price deposit. I have $150,000 right now. $150,000 is going to come from my 401k. Then yes, it would be here because to borrow the money from the 401k,
okay,
I need an accepted offer. But if my, let's say that the 1.7 that I'm using for the rest of my down payment, right, of that $2 million down payment on the loan, the 20% down payment, if that's coming from my 401k, I don't need to reference it in here. Like, let's say I have the full $300,000 for the deposit, but I need the 1.7 is going to come from my 401k to complete the purchase. Then no, I don't need to do it, other than that's what I'm showing as my proof of funds.
okay.
Right, that the 401k is the proof of funds. So
Okay,
no, it
great.
doesn't need to be referenced anywhere.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on to page 2? No? Okay. All right, so let's look at seller credits, right? This is closing cost credits. That's the default. You see it there. Seller's credit to be applied to closing costs or whatever the other is. Look, there is no other that's going to be accepted by a lender for credits. It's going to be for closing costs. That's it. You can't get credits for repairs. Lenders aren't going to allow it. So let's say, for example, that I need to get a credit from the seller. Now, I know there are some buyers out there that still need some closing cost credits. In order for me to have the strongest possible offer and ask for credits, find out exactly to the penny the amount of credit you need from your lender and ask for that amount. I see laziness out there, right, where people just assume, okay, well, in this case, the purchase price is, we're using fantasy numbers here, but I want 3% of the purchase price as closing cost credits because that's what I'll be allowed. So I'm just going to ask for it. Well, that's crazy that I'm going to ask for that amount of credit just because I can ask for 3%. There's no way I need 3%. And even with most loans, even though they have a maximum amount of 3% or 4%, whatever they are, they'll limit the amount of credit to the actual closing costs needed. And then you have issues with, how you're going to refund and what actual credits get taken. But from a listing agent's perspective, when I get an offer that's asking for 3%, I have to assume when I'm figuring out the net to my seller that we're going to pay that entire 3%. Even if ultimately it turns out to be 1%, the closing costs equal out 1%, I still have to make the assumption when I'm presenting this offer to my seller that your net is affected negatively by $300,000. Right. In this case, this is fantasy numbers. I get it. If we change this to a $1 million purchase or a $500,000 purchase, it's still the same thing. I have to work off of the belief that my seller's net is going to be less this $300,000, less the $30,000, less the $3,000. Right. So for us to make our offer as strong as possible, if there is closing cost credits that are necessary, then my conversation with my lender is, tell me exactly the amount of closing costs I need to get from the seller to make this happen. So let's just say that the exact closing cost number is, $2,500, right? At least now that I have to ask for that credit, the seller knows. And remember, we're working with fantasy numbers here, but the seller knows that this is the exact amount of credit I need to do. Now, when they calculate their net sheet, they're calculating it with the right amount. Does that make sense? Does that make sense about credits? Now, questions. Any questions about asking for credits? Now, if you don't need to ask for a credit, don't ask for it. Right? If you don't need that closing cost credit from a seller in this market right now, don't ask for it. Don't ask for it. Now, do I believe that it is smart in this market right now with the lack of inventory and the amount of competition to be asking for credits or working with buyers that don't already have the money necessary to do what they need to do? I wouldn't advise it, but that's a business decision for you and a conversation with the buyer so that the buyer is clear on how much more difficult it's going to be to get an offer accepted without having the money to pay for their own closing costs. Okay. So any questions about the credits before I move on? No? All right. Additional financing terms. Additional financing terms here are specific to the financing. This is not, right? Because now we have a credit, which I love, right? Because the old contract didn't have this section that was specific about sellers' credits. We had to find a place to put it. And a lot of times people would put it in additional financing terms, which is not the proper place to put it. But we don't have to worry about that now because there's a very specific named section for it. So I don't think any buyer's agents any longer are going to get confused on where those credits go. But that's where they're at. So additional financing terms now would be things like if your buyer is qualifying for some kind of down payment assistance program, whether it be a silent second or a grant, whatever it is, if they are getting some kind of down payment assistance program, that's where I would write it here, right? Buyer qualifying for. So if it's some kind of a special program qualifying for whatever program, I have to disclose it. I have to disclose that they're qualifying for that program because it is part of how the seller is choosing to accept their offer. If I just write my offer, for example, as an FHA loan, and I don't disclose that there is a down payment assistance program, if there's any delay from that down payment assistance program, the seller doesn't have to participate in that delay. They don't have to. They could go back and say, no, we want you to qualify for your specific regular FHA loan, and your loan contingency may not protect that buyer if for some reason that down payment assistance program falls through for them, right? Because some of those grants, some of those assistance programs, they run out of money. So you could be in the middle of qualifying for that and all of a sudden the money's gone. And if I hadn't told the seller that the reason I need to cancel is because I don't have the program or the grant any longer, but I didn't tell them that I was qualifying for that, the seller could in essence say, well, that's great, you can cancel, but we're keeping your deposit because we didn't accept your offer knowing that you were qualifying for that program. Does that make sense? Also, alternatively, what could go here would be if the buyer say we're buying the property all cash, and had the all cash, showed proof of all cash when they wrote the offer, but wanted to maybe have the ability to get a hard money loan, you could put in here, buyer may obtain hard money or private money financing. Or I could write it as buyer has the right to, right? Buyer has the right to obtain hard money loan, right? We'll just use that for an example. I'm putting that in now, right? I wrote it all cash, and I do have the cash to do it, but I want to give myself the option of maybe getting a hard money loan instead of doing it. Now, if I put that in there, the seller accepts that. The seller cannot stop me now from switching to that hard money loan because I've made the disclosure. I've done it properly, okay? Now, this would be my suggestion to all of you. If I have an investor or somebody that is purchasing a property using that private money or hard money loan, I would not write the offer as cash. I would say, look, we have to make a choice. In this case, again, for strength of offer. Now, I know cash offers are strong, but you're not the only cash offer out there any longer, right? Tell the truth and just say, hey, listen, if you're going to buy this with a hard money loan, let's tell them from the beginning. Let's just be honest from the beginning, because that question of, is this going to be the cash that they showed me they have, or is it going to be a hard money loan from somebody else that still has some conditions and, could be an obstacle in us getting this offer, this transaction closed quickly, could still taint the opinion of the seller and the listing agent. So be as clear as possible. I mean, if your buyer knows for sure, hey, listen, I'm paying cash for this. I want it. I have the cash. I'm going to pay the cash for it. Then write it all cash. If your buyer says, I'm not sure, maybe I'll get a hard money loan, then that's a conversation and a discussion that maybe you have some clarity on prior to writing the offer. But just to make your offer stronger. But if you do not, then you need to disclose it here that they will have the right to pursue or obtain a hard money loan or private money financing, right? So that the seller knows, okay? So that there's no question. Then if the seller accepts it that way, then you're great. You're golden. You don't have to sweat it, okay? But I wouldn't, going back to page 1, if I'm holding that option of either paying cash or hard money, I am not checking this box for all cash. Okay, I'm going to write the offer as if it were all cash, but I'm not going to check the box for all cash. Does that make sense? Questions about this part of here, the credit and the additional financing terms? Any questions?
Okay. Kyle, I missed it.
Yes. You missed what, Lulu? Be more
specific. So if you have a hard money client, you don't put in all cash. You put in hard money, right? That's it.
I wouldn't check the all cash box. I may still write the offer as if it was all cash, right? If I go back here to this, I'm still going to have the same initial deposit. I'm just going to remove this $8 million, right? I'm going to remove this information on the loan. So I'm still writing it as if all cash. The balance of the down payment is here, right? Like if it's cash. But then I'm going to put here that, buyer may obtain, right, hard money loan. I'm going to disclose that I have the option. I'm letting it be known that I have the option at that point. But I'm just not going to check this box, because once I check this box, what it does is down here, it's automatically going to remove the loan and appraisal contingency. It's automatically going to take those out. And we know that there are still some conditions for hard money financing. So I still want to have that loan contingency in place, even if it's shorter. Okay, so we'll get to that. But that's the thing. That's why I don't want to take off that all cash, because just so you guys can see the difference, if I do this, it starts to gray out. See, I can't even put stuff. It grays stuff out. It grays it out where I can't change it. And you see right here, there is no loan contingency.
Right.
It doesn't even allow me to tick it.
Okay.
Because it's gone. When you write all cash, it's gone. Okay. So I just to keep you guys safe and be honest in your offers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Oscar, I think you unmuted too. Did you have a question?
Yes, my question was, so the way you have it set up right now, but they have the option of, um, if let's say they were going to go hard cash, does that change the cap rate on for the interest?
Well, you would put nothing here. You would put
Okay.
nothing here because with the hard money loan, it is what it is. It's not going to be based off of an interest rate and qualifications. It's those conditions are different. It's usually just the amount of down payment that they're going to put in. So
Okay.
it changes the terms a little bit, but there are some conditions that may be unacceptable, and you just want to make sure that everybody is aware that you're trying to qualify for that. Okay. So
Okay.
no, you don't. That doesn't affect it.
Right.
Sonia, you had a question too.
Yes, Angie, too. If so, let me get this straight. So if we don't state that it's a city program or county program, they could stay with the deposit?
There's a chance because now your loan contingency doesn't protect you. So let's, for example, when and we'll get to it. It's later on, so you can explain to your buyers why we have to do the things we have to do. If I write an offer one way, so for example, in this case, I write an offer as just a straightforward FHA with a 3.5% down payment. But I know that I'm qualifying for either a grant or some other kind of down payment assistance, but I don't tell the seller that that's happening. Now, that secondary part of the qualifying for that down payment assistance is separate from just qualifying for an FHA loan, right? Because there's other things that happen, and people know, like, those grants run out, right? There used to be the Platinum Grant, and some of the city programs and things run out of money for an amount of time. Like, they have so much allocated, and then you have to wait for the next fiscal year or quarter for money to come back in. So there could be reasons why you can't get your loan because of that specific program. So I write the offer and don't disclose to the seller that I'm getting that program. And then I've done my appraisal and the property appraised. I've done my inspections and everything was fine. So I've removed my appraisal, my inspection contingency, let's say. And now the only thing I have left is the loan, right? And I get to that point where all of a sudden the lender comes back and says, hey, that down payment assistance program, it's gone. The one we had you qualified for. So now I don't have the money for the down payment. The seller could just, and when I try to cancel because of the loan contingency, the seller could say, well, you didn't tell me that you were getting that. The argument from the buyer is going to be, well, we showed you that our down payment, right, our proof of funds was this program. So yeah, but nowhere in the contract did I agree to allow you to do that program. You just showed me that as your proof of funds. So just because I allowed it to move forward doesn't mean you were not honest 100%. And there could be an argument where they could say your loan contingency no longer protects you. And they could make an argument to keep your deposit. I'm not saying you're going to lose your deposit. I'm just saying that could be a good argument for them that your loan contingency doesn't protect you, because the loan contingency doesn't protect you if you're not getting specifically the financing that is written into your purchase agreement without getting some kind of written instruction from your seller that they're allowing you to change the financing that you originally got the offer accepted with. Does that make sense? I felt like I got a little confusing with that.
No, it does. My question is if they stay with the deposit, would it be through escrow or arbitration?
Well, it depends. I mean, obviously, it would, depending on the amount of your deposit, it would be through small claims. If it was over 10,000, it would go through mediation arbitration. If the buyer and the seller, let's say, agreed on a different amount, then you would just give the instruction to escrow, and escrow would release it directly. So it would depend on the amount, really, for the fight.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so let's move on. So we're clear on that stuff with the credits and the additional financing terms. Okay, verification of all cash or sufficient funds, right, for the down payment and closing costs, right? These are two separate things. But it's now defaulted to attach to the offer. There's nothing for us to change there. It used to be the default was 3 days after, and we would have to check a box and say, hey, it's attached. Now it's attached, so we don't need to change anything. Here on the verification of a loan application, it's going to be attached, but we have to check off whether it's a pre-qual, a pre-approval, or a fully underwritten approval. So depending on what it is, make sure you check the appropriate box. Let's say that we have the fully underwritten approval. We're going to check off that box. Final verification of condition is 5 days prior to close. We're not going to change that. Okay. Assignment request, 17 days is the default. What I would do with something like that, unless you are unsure on whether you are going to assign it or who you assign it to, I would shorten that down to 7 or maybe 10 days. Okay, just because I want to start making sure that my time periods make sense to them, so that what I'm doing is I'm giving them so that I still have some kind of control over what happens. I know that what's happening now is that everybody is removing appraisal contingency, and even I had an agent call me that says that people are now removing their inspection contingencies prior to going in. I mean, I think it's crazy. I know that it's a little nuts out there, but there's got to be some level of protection from me as an agent. And that's the conversation I have with my buyers. I have to have with my buyers is, look, what we're going to do in these cases is we're going to shorten time frames. So my assignment request, even if I don't ever plan on assigning the property, just because the time period is there, I want the seller to know that I'm not going to take all 17 days, but it's 7 days for me to assign it. My loan contingency, depending on what's happening with my lender, right? If I have a fully underwritten approval, then my loan contingency on a 30-day or a 21-day escrow should never be 17 days. Why, if I have a 21-day escrow? Let's just say that, for example, which I know most people are doing, is writing these offers with 21-day escrows. There is no reason for my loan contingency to be 17 days, which is 4 days prior to close, that I have to remove it. That makes zero sense to me as a listing agent. That if I see that, I'm thinking, you still want a 17-day loan contingency, but you wrote an offer for 21 days to close. Makes no sense. So make it make sense so that when you present it and the listing agent sees it, they understand you know what you're doing. If I have a 21-day close or a 30-day close even, my loan contingency should be not longer than 14 days. Should not be longer than 14 days. There's no reason for it. Okay? So keep that in mind. Appraisal contingency, same thing. I know that people want to remove the appraisal contingency. I get it. Buyers are writing the offer that way. Listing agents are countering it. They're requesting it. If I get a counter to request it, then yes, of course, I have to go back to my buyer and say, this is the way we're getting the offer accepted. Okay? But to still have some level of protection for my client, just because I feel like I have to, I'm going to say I have 10 days to do my appraisal. Okay? Not no appraisal. I'm going to shorten it down to 10 days. That's what I'm going to do. Now, it becomes a business decision for you guys to say, I want no appraisal contingency, knowing that you still have to appraise the property. Now, I may do it if I know with no uncertain terms, my buyer has plenty of cash to pay the difference in appraised value. And the other thing is, before I write the offer, I'm going to look at comps the way I would if I were listing the property. So if I look at it and say, okay, this house is listed for 600, and I look at comps and I see there's some stuff that's over 6 at 625, 630 maybe, that is just closed, then maybe I would feel comfortable telling my client, okay, go ahead and go for the 630, 640 offer, the $30,000 or $40,000 over. These crazy offers that people are getting where it's $100,000 over asking, it's ridiculous. Okay. But if they have the cash and my buyer is willing to do it, then I'll go ahead and remove this. And I'm going to explain to them, and I'm going to cover myself, and I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm going to have emails back and forth that said, listen, we talked about it. We wrote this offer this way before I submit it. You understand that if this property doesn't appraise, your loan contingency no longer protects you. If the only reason we don't qualify is because the property didn't appraise, and you are willing to pay whatever difference there is between appraised value and offer price. Knowing that we did our research, and we feel like the property could be worth 610, 615, 620, whatever, but we're writing a 640 offer, you're okay with the difference between the asking price of 600 and paying the difference. I'm gonna cover myself because I don't want everyone to come back to me and say, you told me to do this. Okay? So if my buyer has plenty of cash, right, more than just the difference between the offer price and the appraised value, then I'm going to go ahead and remove that appraisal contingency. If my buyer doesn't have that money, I wouldn't feel comfortable. So my backup would be, I'm going to offer a shorter period of time for the appraisal. I mean, 10 days might be even tough to get the appraisal done, but at least I have a contingency in there. And if we can't get things done and we're getting pressured, at least it gives my buyer a way to get out, to protect them. I don't want my buyer to get out. Like, if we have the appraisal done and it appraises, I'm removing the appraisal contingency on my own. I'm not waiting for an ask. Okay. So shorten it. Now here's here's where maybe what I would do is let's say that I have this 10 days appraisal period, right? I'm asking for the contingency. Instead of where it says appraisal contingency based on upon appraised value at minimum of purchase price, I'm going to change this and say, okay, look, you listed it for 600. We're writing a crazy offer at 640 or 650. What we're going to do is we want an appraisal contingency because we need it, right? We need to get the property to appraise in order to purchase. But the property only has to appraise for your offer price. Right? My buyer has the $40,000 or $50,000 to pay the difference, and I can only use my appraisal contingency to get out if the property appraises less than the $600,000 number. So you listed it for 600, but let's say it appraised at 590. Then I could still use my appraisal contingency to get out. If it appraises for anything over 600, I'm committed, and my appraisal contingency no longer protects me. Does that make sense to you guys? So that could be my give and take to say, instead of no appraisal contingency, what I'm saying is it only has to appraise for what you offered it at, what you put it on the market at. If it appraises for that or more, whatever the difference is, I'm on the hook, and I can't use my appraisal contingency to bail. Right? So what I'm doing is I'm strengthening my offer. Now, if I'm an FHA buyer, right? If I'm an FHA buyer, we all know I have this FVAC form, right? The FHA VA amendatory clause that says that even if I have no appraisal contingency, I can't lose my deposit if the property doesn't appraise for a very specific amount, right? Which is usually the offer price that we put in there. If I am, again, saying that I am willing to pay because I have the money, then whatever number I put here, then I'm also going to put on the FVAC, so I don't have that fallback, like that parachute where I can pretend like I'm committed, an FHA buyer, which is what they do. I can pretend like I'm committed and then say, oh, well, I have an FHA buyer, so I can't lose my deposit, and I can bail anyway. So keep that in mind when you're writing these offers. Questions? Yeah, go for it, Lulu.
That so an FHA buyer can actually back out because of that form.
Depending on how it's filled out. Now, like if you write the offer, and let's say my offer is for $650,000, and I write $650,000 on the FVAC, the mandatory clause, and it appraises for $635,000, even if I have no appraisal contingency and I'm an FHA buyer, you cannot keep my deposit, seller.
Oh wow.
Okay. So you have to understand that. And I know I said we weren't going to talk about counters, but if you're a listing agent and you're accepting FHA offers, and you get an FVAC that has the offer price, but you're asking them to remove their appraisal contingency, then you better lower that. You better send them their own in the counter, an FVAC that has your list price on there, because you should be confident in your list price that it's going to appraise for your list price. Otherwise, why bother to have them remove the appraisal contingency on an FHA if you're going to accept an FVAC offer with the offer price on it? Doesn't make sense.
So they have to put the offer price on the FBAC, the same price that's on the RPA, right? Initially?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like if I'm a buyer's agent and I'm writing an FHA offer and I write an offer for $600,000, then I want the property to appraise for $600,000 before I can give up, before I forfeit my deposit as an FHA buyer. That's what we normally would do as a buyer's agent to protect our buyers. But if I'm the seller, well, wait a minute. I offered you this house at $600,000 and you wrote an offer at $650,000. But now in your FHA amendatory clause, you're saying that if it doesn't appraise for that $650,000, even though I removed my appraisal contingency, you don't get to keep my deposit. There is no consequence for me. That makes zero sense for me as a seller. So as a seller, I'm going to say, no, I'm going to send you a new amendatory clause with the corrected price. But if you want to have a strong offer as a buyer and you're committed to paying a difference between the appraised value and the offer price that you made, then you should make that step and say, here's my FHA amendatory clause that says I only care if it appraises for your list price, not my offer price, and I'll pay the difference. I'm going to put my deposit at jeopardy because I want this property. See, that the problem with all of this, like remove appraisal contingencies and all that stuff, I know people think it makes your offer stronger, but it's really smoke and mirrors because it doesn't. Most of these buyers are like, a lot of these buyers are FHA buyers, and they know that they have this backstop of the amendatory clause, and the listing agents don't know any better either. So they're accepting these offers saying, okay, we got them. There's no appraisal contingency. They're locked in. Wrong. Their deposit is safe. So it's about making sure that everything makes sense. So for me, I want to have a strong offer, but I know I need to appraise. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to lower my appraisal threshold to your list price. Showing you that, yeah, I have to get an appraisal, but I'm okay if it doesn't appraise for my offer price as long as it appraises for what you listed it for. Because you should be confident listing agent in your price. So guess what? If you overlisted it, and I put this 600 and now it appraises for 585, I'm safe. You should feel super confident that it's going to appraise for the 600. Does that make sense though on the FHA and the VA stuff?
Right. So now with conventional, we don't have to worry about this.
No, not that. No, with conventional, it's not that. If they don't have an appraisal contingency, they don't have an appraisal contingency.
Okay.
All right.
Got it. Okay.
All right. So Gilbert has in the chat, does anything change if we get countered to remove the appraisal contingency in regards to? No, as long as they don't change the FVAC that you sent in and you sent it in at your offer price and they sign and return it, it doesn't change that they ask you to remove the appraisal. If there's no appraisal contingency and you're an FHA buyer, that FVAC form still protects the buyer. And guess what? Even if they don't sign this one that you send with your offer, escrow makes them do one, and escrow will automatically put in the offer price. So either way, there's going to be an FVAC that has to be signed by both parties. And once it's signed, that's a part of the transaction, and your buyer's deposit is protected at that point. So again, just keep in mind how you're going to present your strongest offer, and only do this kind of stuff like no appraisal contingency or a lower appraisal contingency threshold, if your buyer has the money. That's it. Okay. All right. Investigation of property. Again, if I'm doing a 21-day escrow, why do I have 17 days to do my investigation? Shorten it. 10 days, right? Informational access to the property, 10 days, right? You have access even if the contingencies are removed. So I'm going to shorten that time period to match, okay? The review of seller's documents. No, I don't need 17 days to do. I need 10. The title report, 10. But guess what? With all of these things, I have more time if the seller doesn't perform, right? If they don't provide me with the documents that we're talking about. All of these things, right? Common interest disclosures, 10, right? Everything is going to be 10. Review of leased or liened items, 10 days. I'm going to shorten all those time periods. It makes sense, okay? I'm going to stop there because we're at 10:54 and we're going to get into conversations that we're not going to be able to finish in 6 minutes on some of the stuff that's coming up. So real quick, questions about what we're doing here on the writing. Any questions that we've talked about on anything so far today? Anybody? Yes, Sonia.
On L2 for the appraisal on the 600,000, let's say that I put the 600,000, but it comes in lower. Because I stated this 600,000, do I have to, there's no room for me to negotiate for my buyer to come lower?
No, you can still negotiate. Look, here's what happens. Okay, you write an offer for 650. Okay, we know it's not going to appraise for 650. It was listed at 600. We just know that there's no chance. It might appraise for 620, 630, but it's not going to appraise for 650. But it was listed for sale at $600,000. So if I put in here this 600, it means that if it doesn't appraise for at least 600, I have the right to use my appraisal contingency and get out of the transaction. So no matter what, you still have the right to negotiate. Let's say it comes in at 585. You could say to the listing agent, look, here's the deal. My appraisal contingency said it had to appraise for 600, and I was willing to pay the difference between 600 and 650. But now it appraised at 585. So I'm not going to pay an additional $15,000 because it didn't appraise for what you offered it at. So what I will do is instead of paying you $650, I'll pay you $635 for the property because I was already willing to come in with $50,000. So I'm willing to do that still. But now our new sales price is $635. So I'm still only coming in with $50. That's absolutely okay to do. And if they say no, we want 650, then you could cancel because you still have an appraisal contingency and the property did not appraise for 600. But you can always negotiate.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, because I thought that because we put the 600, we were committed to those 600.
No. It just says the property has to appraise for that much. What I am committed to is 650 because that's what I offered you. Right? I just say it has to appraise for that much for me to be committed to 650. Now, if it appraises for less than that, then I can always go back and say, listen, it didn't appraise for 6. So I'm not going to pay you 650 for something that didn't appraise for at least 6 because that's what we agreed upon. So I will pay you 625 or I will pay you 635 or I will pay you 640 because that was the amount I was committed to pay you. And if the seller doesn't want to reduce the price, then I have an appraisal contingency that will allow me to extricate myself from this transaction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, guys? No? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully, so far, this is going to help you as you start writing some offers. And I'm always available to you guys to help out with that, too. We'll finish off this contract next Thursday. Right, the 7th. Yeah, we should be able to do that. We'll finish that next week. Any other questions before I let you guys go? No? All right.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys being here. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you guys soon.
All right, bye.